And ooh, wow. You got me, Sam, huh? Yeah, gotta get a little better there. So for me, if I can, because I always like ladies to go first, so Representative Lott, you want to start off?
It's actually
No,
Representative Jenkins
I'll
Bell.
present the bill.
Okay, I was just trying to be politically incorrect.
Thank you, though. Thank you, though.
Well, good morning, members of the committee. I'm here to present House Bill 254, LC 491340S. This bill modernizes legislation relating to legal organs. This bill is brought because, we see a definite change in print media in the modern world. Just looked at a study here that says by 2025, a full third of our newspapers are projected to be lost by then. And this particularly impacts rural Georgia, where there are less papers to begin with. And over the last few years, we've had legal organs cease publication and leaving counties without good options for legal organs according to Georgia law. So this visits that issue. It changes Georgia law to make it easier for these counties to select a good legal organ. The other part of this legislation is addresses the errors that seem to be fairly prolific. I have some research from Columbia County that over the last 5 years, they've cited 20 errors in publication that resulted in the interruption of legal processes as a result of these errors. So what this legislation does in Section 3 is that it allows the municipality or county to run the ad as currently required in the legal organ, but if the legal organ fails to publish the ad as it was supposed to, they can now use electronic means to back that up and proceed with the process with the announcement on electronic means. So that change was Section 3. The other thing that's addressed in this bill is under Section 2. This drastically increases the ad rates for legal organs. First 100 words have been increased from $10 to $15, and on subsequent publications, $9 to $14 per 100 words. So with that, that's pretty much the bill from beginning to end. I'll stand for your questions. Or actually, I guess Representative Lott wants to present some Columbia County data for you.
If the chairman allows, I would like to do that.
Of course.
I know we spoke about that earlier. I came because we are having difficulties in Columbia County. And one example, just to explain why we even entered into this, we requested through our legal organ an ad on May the 24th and listed the dates for it to run. On June the 1st, when it did not run, we sent an email that said, please run beginning 6/8. On June the 6th, we sent a note that just said we've not received a response. On June the 7th, we received a return letter back that said, due to a recent transition, the below ad cannot run 6/8. Are there alternate dates? And all of this was for a sewer repair. So we went from June the 1st until the week after June the 8th because basically they could not get the ad done, and we've had example of that over and over, and so the request was made, and Representative Jenkins did state clearly that the intent of this is to not change any of the requirements on on our legal organs. It's still required, and it doesn't change any of the requirements of the legal organ. They still must do all that they said they would do. But this third section just allows for the digital ad placement to count as day one, and that will help us continue on with our projects.
Yeah.
That's really my piece, and I'd welcome any questions as well.
And I'm not sure which one of y'all wants to address this, but
I'll take your questions.
When I started looking at the bill, and you mentioned in your testimony that there's newspapers that are going out of business, out of circulation, that presents a problem. I believe the AJC even announced that they're going full digital. They're not going to be publishing on newsprint anymore. and you start looking at this, I reached out to my local newspaper that does several newspapers in several counties around me and most of my district. We talked a little bit about it. One of the things that I want to commend where's our Georgia Press Association folks? Said I want to commend the Georgia Press Association for having a website that kind of combines all of the legal ads in one location where if you want to go look at them that way. I'm not going to do it to your bill, but I do know that in the future we probably want to look at, okay, how do we take that Georgia Press Association repository of all of the legal ads, make that into something that we can use as the statewide legal organ, searchable database, electronic, everybody's got access to it. But more importantly, let them print that every day and send 159 counties to 159 county clerks and do that. We won't do it today, but I will tell you there's a lot of opportunities to make this a little more technology savvy and a little bit more friendly. I commend you on it. I do have a question about when you mentioned the excessive increase. You were the one that sponsored the bill.
I am. Didn't realize I used that adjective, but there is an increase.
Yes, you did use an adjective. If that wasn't exactly it, it was. You did say it was a quite large or
Right.
excessive.
Right.
So
you
want to touch on that? How'd you reach that number?
That number is these ad rates hadn't increased in about 30 years, and so these. I believe it was the Press Association that helped us out to find where the increase should be increased to on those ad rates.
Okay. You got a couple questions from our.
I'm sorry, could I add to
Representative
that?
Lott?
The consumer pricing index on that would have placed it over $18. So we've cut back a little bit, and we just tried to make a compromise in the middle.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions from our members. Our whip, Senator Robertson.
Good morning. I appreciate y'all bringing this legislation. Brief history. I learned how to reading a newspaper with my mom, and I love newspapers. Every Sunday I buy as many as I can when my wife and I go to brunch. I love them, but my problem is when I go to other cities, Columbus, Asheville, other places on a visit, as I walk around, I see these paper boxes that are newspapers. And I get the newspapers out, and they have some news articles in them, but fairly quickly I realize these are radical or racist or something like that publications that mix in news with a political slant and something like that. So, and they have a circulation beyond 100 per issue, of course. So could one of these, if the local legal organ is not meeting all of its requirements, could they possibly qualify to be a temporary avenue to get these legal notices in there?
So,
and would they benefit from it?
So if the legal organ, if a legal organ that is specified in Georgia code is not available, then the probate judge, sheriff, and the clerk of Superior Court, the majority of those officers will select one that does have at least 100 copies per issue in their county, and those members have that full discretion. And yes, I am aware of media bias myself. We've all seen that.
Yes, and you and I have sat down and watched it together.
We
But
have.
my concern is, and of course, it's my opinion. I find the Harris County Journal, I find to be a legitimate newspaper. The Columbus Ledger, I find a legitimate newspaper. But there's a newspaper in my district that I do not find to be a legitimate, and they print them out by the stacks. They go put them into the drugstores and other places that people can grab them when they grab real newspapers and as they walk out. And by doing this, and I understand it would be a temporary fix because of the failure of the legal organ, but they could benefit
Right.
from running these types of ads.
That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And I'll also say, and I think we all, probably a lot of folks here are aware, the House has tried to address this issue for the last several sessions, and I think there's been attempts with the Senate to solve some of these same problems. And the reality is, this is the one that we've gotten out of our chamber to your chamber, and it will help a lot of people. And that's, I think there is a lot of work to be done, as you said, on this matter. I hope we can continue to work on this in the future, but this is what we've been able to get across the finish line to this committee today.
Thank you. The Representative Lott, you mentioned that it was a sewer repair. Was there a sewage spill that occurred because of the failure of the ad?
There was not in particular. They were just doing a sewer repair at the time. They were doing a sewer repair and had to post. And that was one example. Again, he mentioned that we've had them track them for the last 5 years, and we have tried for many years to get some solution to these problems. One being what you just discussed, creating that interim legal organ. And then, of course, we want to be able to post on our county website and on the Georgia Public Notice website and have that count. So, yeah, we're begging for a solution to all of our delays.
Thank you. The Senator Still, you have a question?
I do, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The attorneys that I've spoken to about this bill, both metro and rural, they've, for the last decade or more, they've been referring to either the local county website on public notices or the Georgia Public Notice website, because it's more reliable, it's more consistent, doesn't have the issues that you suggested. And as a former media guy myself, it's very poorly kept secret that these ad rates are what keep a lot of these small papers alive, and legal notices are what pay for newspapers. So giving them a 50% pay increase because they haven't needed it for 30 years, it was because they had higher circulations. Now to a decrease in circulation, now they want a 50% pay bump. Just kind of wondering the logic that went into that, other than just it was 30 years and now they're wanting a big
Right. And it was explained to me, essentially, it's been 30 years and the cost of everything has gone up, and that was their basis, to my understanding.
And I can add something to that. Certainly the younger generation is still, is interested in the digital, but I know in my community and a lot of rural communities, we still have a very heavy population of people that, like Senator Robertson, want to buy the paper. So the circulations have decreased, but it was not our intent in this legislation to make the big change, to force all of those notices to go elsewhere, or even allow all of those notices to go elsewhere at this time, just because we had to recognize that there are a lot of people that do still rely and really adore having a newspaper in their hand. So we did kind of focus on the middle ground again.
So then as a follow-up to that, so because people like to have a hard paper in hand, that's for news and shopping guides and everything else like that, not necessarily for legal notices, which is the purpose of this. I'm just wondering if we're giving rural newspapers a prop up for the handful of legal notices they get, just to try to keep some of those papers going. And is this the vehicle that we're using to keep rural print media alive?
I would not suggest it was the vehicle.
I'm going to suggest it was the whole reason that Senator Robertson can read, and so if that's what made it happen, we want to keep Senator Robertson able to read. So I'm not sure that works, but Senator Estevez, you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to note that I believe the representative said that Senator Robertson was of a certain generation that would rely on these print documents. I don't know. Maybe I heard that incorrectly.
It may have been implied.
Yes.
I don't know.
I do appreciate the comments about the rates, but I think it is worth noting that if you keep up with CPI, these rates would have been much higher.
Correct.
Relative, right? $18 instead of $15. And I do think that there are plenty of folks who rely on these on these legal notices being in print, although not of my generation, and certainly want to support what we can, but also make sure that the process is updated and correct. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd love to make a motion.
At the
when
proper
ready.
time, I'll
Proper
call on you to
time.
do that. Said we do have one witness that wants to testify on the bill, and that would be Mr. Todd Edwards from the Association of County Commissioners, Georgia.
I'll wait, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay. The Senator Esvez, your motion would be in order.
I'd like to make a motion to pass.
And if you would state your LC number.
LC 491340S.
Okay. Is there a second? A second from Senator Williams. The all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Senator Butler, did I hear you? Okay, thank you. The your motion passes unanimously. Said the congratulations. Who would you like to carry this bill in the Senate?
Lee Anderson.
Okay. The we're not sure if he can read. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. Thank you very much. Said the y'all have a good day. Appreciate your testimony. The
Thank you, committee.
Colonel Hitchens, I believe you're up next with House Bill 437, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of substitute to House Bill 437, LC 365509S.
Do we have that? Am I looking at the wrong one? Yeah. What was that LC number again?
Unless you have a new substitute.
We got a new substitute. LC 365523S.
Thank you. So now we're on the same page.
And essentially it's the same, but this is on behalf of the Department of Administrative Services. Within the Department of administratively attached is a group called the Georgia State Indemnification Commission. And the mission of the State Indemnification Commission is to provide monetary benefits to public safety officers killed in the line of duty or permanently disabled. And essentially all this bill does, it's been in place for many years. I served 12 years on the commission myself, and I know very much how it works. And what this does is the commission is made up as the governor as the chairman and about 9 department heads. And with me today is Alderman Cole, who's the general counsel for DOES, and she's the one that administers the program. But what this bill would do is it would change it from the commission to being the responsibility of the commissioner of DOES. And actually, Ms. Cole in her current position would be a hearing officer, and she would hear the case. As they do it today, she prepares the case. She does all the legwork with her staff and presents the case. 99% of the time, the commission goes along with whatever recommendation they make. But she would be the hearing officer. If the petitioner is unsatisfied with the result, has the ability to petition it to the Commissioner of Department of Administrative Services. If they're unsatisfied there, they can move it to the Superior Court. And that's essentially it.
Yeah. Committee members, are there any questions for the sponsor?
I don't know if Ms. Cole wants to say anything.
Sir Robertson,
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to, at the proper time.
are there, Senator Esvez, you have a question?
Yes, the appeal process at the moment, it would go through the commission, and then after the commission, what would be the
In current
process.
status or what's
Current
proposed?
status.
Current status is the department makes an initial decision. We do, through our risk management services program, we also run the state liability program. This is something we are well versed on is reviewing claims and facts of claims and making determinations, and that initial determination can be appealed to the commission. As Colonel Hitchens said, we prepare and prep the commission for those meetings. Those meetings are difficult to schedule given those folks that are sitting on those meetings. So this is really intended to streamline that process. But ultimately, the appellants have the opportunity to be heard in front of the decision maker, which will now be the commissioner of DOAS. And then we added that fourth or additional level of appeal to Superior Court, which does not currently exist in law as an additional protection of oversight over the department's actions. But this is something that is just intended to get answers to these public safety officers and their families in a more efficient and quicker manner, because right now it's a little bit more cumbersome of a process to pull that commission together for those decisions and those meetings.
Thank you, and that's what was at the heart of my question was, do they have the right to appeal to the court now? And the answer is no. It stops
Not
at the
directly in
commission.
statute. There's a legal argument that potentially we haven't experienced that in the history of the commission, to my knowledge. It hasn't been tested, but we're putting it and writing it directly within the code. It will be within our rules and regulations that we will also promulgate pursuant to the bill as well, regarding and providing information to the appellants as to how the new process will operate. And we will, of course, provide direction around that appeal to the Superior Court as well.
And there's nothing in the bill right now, but with COVID, they've become very backlogged. They've got about triple the number of people who've asked for a review because determination about whether you got COVID based on your activities at work or whether you picked it up somewhere else has been very difficult to differentiate. So this would just be an expedient manner of handling them. The governor and all the department heads wouldn't be tied up routinely in trying to deal with these.
One other question from Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many people does this affect? Do you have a count?
Well, as far as how many actual appeals we received in the last 4 years, we've only received 6 appeals that went in front of the commission. As Colonel Hitchens, as far as actual total claims, the claims went from an average of about 15 per year to closer to 50 per year during 2020 and 2021 and 2022. We're starting to see a little bit of a drop now, but that's kind of total claims versus appealed. We just don't have very many of these appeal claims coming up, and therefore we generally try to have at least 2 to pull together a commission meeting. And so the result of that, because of the effort that goes into those commission meetings, we've only had about 1 per year the last 4 years. So this is just to get those answers a little bit quicker.
I noticed that on or after January 1, 1990, are there any out there that perhaps 1989 that might be affected?
No, sir, I don't believe that we have any. So the way that the payment of these work is it's either a lump sum or it's a 5-year payment process. So any claims from that far back would have been resolved by now. And we only have 1 pending appeal in the moment, and I believe that was the actual occurrence of the death, if my memory serving me well, was 2021.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Robertson, you have a motion?
I do. Quickly, I want to tell the Colonel, thank you for streamlining this process. Very familiar with it, and clearing up this bureaucracy will also save us some money. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to do pass.
And that LC number? It's a reading test.
Yes, sir. Large print. At a certain age, it will definitely be large print. The LC I'm looking at is LC 365523, S as in Sierra.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second from our vice chair, so the all in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. I can see better than I can hear. Congratulations, Colonel. Who's going to carry this bill for you?
Senator Albers.
Senator Albers, okay. Thank you very much. And Ms. Cole, if I'll ask you to stay till we. Thank you. Okay, the mother of all bills said we're going to have a hearing and a hearing only on it, but I do want to have come on up, Representative. Said we appreciate you coming up. Representative Saines, you want you know, would you want my vice chairman to join you out there? He looks better on TV up here.
You know, I have a great view of him right now, so I'd hate to lose it. But wherever he'd like to sit, I'm amenable to it.
Okay, well, I know that this will be the tag team show. So, Representative Saines, why don't you help us kind of walk through the bill? And the reason that, just so you know, I've got a couple questions that I read through the bill and I look and I want to ask our committee members to between the hearing today and our next meeting to ask you to each read through the bill and understand kind of what it does, because this is, quite honestly, it creates the automatically 159 authorities in every county, and it also creates one for every city. So this is a very big step that when we start talking about this, and it's not a bad purpose. I get what they're trying to do, but it has the potential to create an awful lot, or it does create an awful lot of authorities.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have a simple little bill to bring before the committee. Just a couple 23 pages, 25. I would note in terms of the chairman is correct in terms of the language of the bill, creation of local authorities. That's typical language on authority legislation. It must still be authorized by each locality. So though the enabling legislation puts it as created, so it is correct, the practicality of it is every city or county who wants the authority to be in use would have to approve each authority, or else it's codified in law, but it is not active. Want to start with that because I know that is a dramatic language in terms of that law. I'll go back and talk about the premise and the policy intent of the commercial property assessment, conservation, energy, and resiliency program that this legislation would enable. We currently have that program in code under the downtown development authorities. It's only one has been able to work under that framework in Atlanta, given the size and scope of that downtown development authority. It's just shown not to be the place or the intent of DDAs to go into this kind of financial mechanism. As you can see, it is complex. This loan program would enable a private property owner to seek 100% private capital to for proven purposes in the bill at a much lower rate than you would typically get a structure, and the approved purposes would be anything that is energy efficient, which would be above required building code, and also of particular interest in my district, and I'm sure many others, if a natural disaster happens, or to prepare for typical hurricanes, tornadoes, to build a building that is more resilient to those natural disasters. That would also be allowable. I have a good example of the legislation. A developer, Jacoby Development, who is revitalizing the Gilman Paper Mill property in St. Mary's, Georgia, which was once the largest employer in the entire southeast below Macon. That has been a brownfield site for the last 15 or so years. They came and asked for this legislation because they saw this as a very good tool in their arsenal in developing that. Many other developers have seen it as well. So though it is a complex bill, I think the policy intent and the usability to move our communities forward with private capital is more than worth looking at. The legislation itself is based on the Resource Recovery Development Authority Code section. So we bring the language into this and create that new authority. Currently we have Economic Development Authority Code section, the DDA, Resource Recovery, and then this would be the new one for the CPACE program. And that is where the authority language comes in. The purpose of the authority, because of Georgia's gratuities laws, we have to, in other states, they could be a pure transaction just like a bank loan. Because of the way our mechanisms work, that's what requires the authority to be in place. The local government would create the authority. It can be a city or a county. For the purposes of this, it can mimic your Economic Development Authority board, so it could practically function under that same organization and staff members. And then once it's in place, that landowner who would like to use it, that property owner, would find the private capital provider to use that CPACE program. The authority would approve it. The local government that enabled the authority would then have the requirement to approve it or deny it. So there are several filters here to make sure it's in good. And that local government and authority can capture. Yes, sir.
I want to interrupt just a minute and let's make some questions here.
Okay.
So I've worked with a couple development authorities. When you look at a private equity coming into something like this, and okay, you got a agreeable lender that says, hey, I'm gonna let you borrow some money. You know, they're taking advantage of the tax situation and the tax advantages of doing it through a local government. Said is there why you're getting a better rate? Is the only thing I can assume.
Better.
A much better rate. Said it will help fund a project like this. But you know, when you do have an authority or any kind of government involved in it, then I look at the taxpayers and they're on the hook for this, because if the project fails at some point, then you're going to have the taxpayers may end up having to eat that loan. How do you protect the taxpayers?
So I don't want to misstate. I think that's a great question. If you're amenable to it, if I could ask George Ray or one of his many Earl Taylor, who is a specialized attorney in this in authority and bond law, to respond to that if you're okay with it, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Earl Taylor with Nelson Mullins. So the taxpayers are not at risk in this statute. First of all, the authority obligation specifically provides that the taxpayers can never be taxed to pay the authority obligation. The intergovernmental contract between the authority and the local government provides that it has to be a limited obligation of the local government payable only from the special assessment that the commercial property owner improving their property agrees to put on their property. So the only source of payment for these financial obligations is a special assessment the commercial property owner agrees to put on their property. The general taxpayers, the general fund, can never be touched under this legislation the way it's drafted.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'll admit that right up front, but I was a county manager in a county where the county did a bond and an intergovernmental agreement to build a new hospital.
Right.
None of the taxpayers were thinking they were on the hook until the hospital went down and the bonds weren't paid, and then they realized, oh wait, we got a couple $1 million to pay off on this deal.
Yeah.
And so for me, maybe we can talk after long, since today is just a hearing. Maybe you can get a better explanation for me on that. But that is a great concern for me.
Yeah.
That how do we protect those taxpayers in moving this forward? Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, there are intergovernmental contracts that a development authority can enter into an intergovernmental contract to a city or county. A county can pledge up to $1 million of tax. A city can pledge up to $3 million of tax to back a development authority obligation. That is not allowed under this bill. The hospital authority example you gave me, the taxpayers can enter. You can have an intergovernmental contract that pledges up to $7 million of tax for a hospital authority obligation. None of that is permitted under this legislation. The definition of intergovernmental contract is it's a limited obligation of the local government payable only from the special assessment.
And I'll direct it to Representative Saines. I'm sorry. Said but on the bill, you know, I looked at your makeup of your authority members, and you're appointing 2 of the members, and then those members can appoint other members. If I remember right, reading somewhere in the language that how the authority is made up.
So if it's a single county,
for a joint authority.
so a joint authority, yeah. So the joint authority, I don't believe the members can appoint other members. The sponsoring
Line
government.
184.
Okay, let me
Thank
see.
you.
With additional member to be appointed by the board of directors themselves.
Okay, yeah. So, in the case of a joint resiliency, each unit shall appoint 2 members, with additional members to be directed by directors themselves. Yeah. So what that does, it gives each sponsoring government an equal number of members, and then you got to have a tiebreaker And so those sponsoring government's members all have got to agree on who's going to be the tiebreaker, the way the bill is designed.
So clarify, it's a single, the way that I read the code, it's a single member, additional one member that to make it odd. And I don't know if we want to tighten that language to make
and
sure.
that's where for me, I'm just trying to ask some questions because this truly adds every county, every city can create this authority, and we could end up having hundreds of more authorities here. One of the questions that I would ask would be, because we have an authorities registration requirement in Georgia. Well, you've created all the authorities, but you haven't, they don't have the ability to do transactions. So where does that fall into DCA's requirement that every authority, they have a report for what's going on with their authority registration each year? Will these authorities, now that they're created, will they have to respond to DCA, and how does that work? So
Yep.
One
So-
second.
so-
One second. Prior to that, I would say is an amendment because we had the discussion in government affairs in the House in terms of the language that enabled all the authority to be created. After the response, because I'm sure there is one, we are amenable to make in the interim after we have this hearing to look at that language if that might make the committee more amenable to modify that language to where it creates all authorities instead of enables local government to create the authority. I just wanted to state that because it was a concern in government affairs in the House as well.
Yeah, so the bill does create in every city and county an authority, and that's typically how general law development authorities work. If they lie dormant until the local government adopts an activating resolution activating the authority. So as long as they lie dormant, there's no requirement to register with DCA because it's not a legally active entity. Once that activating resolution is adopted and it becomes active, then that will fall under the registration provisions of DCA and will register with DCA just like every other authority in Georgia does. And this is the Development Authorities Clause of the Constitution authorizes the General Assembly to create development authorities. In '63, they created the Development Authorities Law, 78 Resource Recovery Development Authorities Law, 81 the Downtown Development Authorities Law. This will be the fourth exercise of that power under the Constitution.
And for me, one of the questions that just comes to mind right on this is, okay, why create all these new authorities? Why don't we use the existing development authorities and give them some additional powers to say, hey, if the development authority so chooses to do this, what would be wrong with allowing that development authority to create this authority for energy and efficiency and stabilization?
That was my first question when it came, because that's probably my least favorite part of the bill. I still like the policy enough to have moved it forward. My understanding, and I'm sure Mr. Taylor can elaborate on this, is the complexity of the CPACE structure and it being completely private capital. It fit better in creating different code. I understand it is possible if the committee does prefer to do something under the Economic Development Code, but we then are giving economic development authorities more broader powers. So there is a benefit to look at it in the realm of right now local government can decide if their community has this kind of power. If we put it in code section for economic development authorities, those local communities couldn't decide that existing development authority having that added power. So there's benefits and downfalls to both approaches, but I do want to state if that is an approach the committee wants to look at, there might be a possibility to do so.
It's such a complicated program, it really demands its own authority. It would take a major overhaul of the Development Authorities Law. For instance, development authorities don't have grant powers. Downtown development authorities do. We would have to open up a lot of things in the Development Authorities Law and do a pretty major rewrite. Probably, I know how to do it, but it would be a big undertaking for the Development Authorities Law. We thought it was cleaner to go with this approach.
Yeah, I believe Senator Williams, you have a question? Oh, was it Senator Butler? I'm sorry. Whoever's mic 12.
It's 12. Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned 159 authorities. Do you have a number as as to how many it would really create?
It's going to be much less than that because there are a lot of cities and counties that probably will not use this program, that will actually activate. The major cities will use it. Some of the smaller towns will use it for their downtown redevelopment. It can be used for agricultural purposes, but I don't anticipate seeing these authorities created in every city and county in Georgia, or activated in every city and county in Georgia.
And the way
Leader Butler said, if I'm going to interject, said 159 counties. I don't want to overlook, there's 537 cities. So this automatically creates 537 authorities in each city if they choose, and 159 counties. So I don't want to slight our GMA friends out there, but it does create the enabling legislation for every city and every county to do this.
And I would add, Mr. Chairman, I did clarify the language if the committee would prefer, and it doesn't seem to change the policy intent. On line 157, to modify, there is created in and for each county and municipal corporation in the state a public body, corporate and political. To modify it and strike, there is created in and for. So to start at each on line 157 and move in between and put may create, municipal corporation in this state may create a public body, corporate and politic. That would clarify that it is up to that local government to create that authority. We're enabling those local governments to do so. So you are correct. The possibility is 537 plus 139, and I can't do that math in my head, but the practicality is we're giving local control on whether that's necessary or not. I don't know if that doesn't change the policy intent, but it might clarify the language for those looking through the process. I don't like the
Hold that thought just a minute.
I've got a markup that takes care of that. It's a little more than that. Okay. It gets rid of the activation. Okay. It's not major. Yeah, I've got a markup. So I give it to George.
Since this is a hearing only, I want to make sure that you understand there's a constitutional question as to whether or not we can allow for local governments to create these authorities. And so that'd be one of the things that we'll try to get clarification between this hearing and the next potential hearing on the bill. But for me, there's a lot of things that are happening here in this legislation that, and this is where for me, I just want to make sure that, because I do have an enormous number of new members to the Senate, said this year. I know some of them have been here. They quite experienced, but I know I have some that are brand new to the Senate. The importance of what we do in committee and making sure that we're familiar with what the bill's going to do and whether it moves forward or not, I don't take lightly, and I want to make sure that each of y'all look at this and what's going on with it. So I believe, is that Senator Mallow? You have a question?
I do. Thank you, Chairman, again, and to the author of the bill. I know you spoke about the constitutionality. My question is, would this be enabling state statute that could then be followed up should a local government want to do that by a local act? Would that be the process for that? Would this give the guardrails, and for the establishment have to come back by a local act, local legislation? Should a municipality choose to do this, it would require the members of that delegation to agree to it? Would that be something to be considered in this?
That's the reason we have plenty of lawyers in the building, because I can't answer that question off the top of my head. But
I know Mr. Morelli is an expert.
We have a really good one that assists our committee, so that'll be a thought for consideration.
Yeah, there'll be no need for local legislation. There'll be a local resolution activating the authority, but all of the guardrails and all the powers are contained in the general legislation. And on the constitutionality question, we're traveling under the Development Authorities Clause of the Georgia Constitution that gives the General Assembly the power to create development authorities.
And I would add, in terms of, it didn't come up in the House committee, but I know many of our House members have left and joined your body, so that might have been the question that didn't get asked there. But if that is a more comfortable statute, I'm assuming we can require the provision of local legislation as an added filter if that is amenable to the committee or preferred. But it isn't currently, as Mr. Taylor mentioned, necessary as the bill is now.
And because this is a hearing, I'm going to be a little bit more forthcoming. Basically, what's happening here is you have areas in the state, excuse me, where people want to proceed with improvements to their property. They're wanting to do these things for energy conservation, water conservation, whatever the case is, hardening a structure. And they're asking for a benefit by having some government-sponsored financing to allow this to take place that improves their community. And this is where, for me, I don't begrudge the concept of what's going on, but I do want to make sure that everybody understands this is a potentially very big expansion in what the government role is. So for me, this is why I'm asking my committee members to ask questions and participate in the discussion. Senator Williams, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I have served on a downtown development authority in the past. What is different from this? Is it the financing? Is it the guaranteeing of the money?
Yeah, so what's different, the program, if you cut through it all, if we weren't in Georgia, if we were in another state, a property owner that wanted to make an energy or water savings improvement or resiliency improvement would come to a local government and say, would you borrow money on my behalf to improve my property and put a special assessment on my property to pay that loan back? Because the Georgia courts have held that assessments or taxes, I can't do that in Georgia without a voter referendum every time we do a loan, which would be just completely unwieldy. But with an intergovernmental contract, I can avoid the referendum requirement. So we need to create a development authority to go out and borrow the money to get the money to the developer, the property owner, to improve the property. And then the local government imposes a special assessment, enters into an intergovernmental contract to pay the special assessment to the development authority to pay the loan. So that is how the program works. We've got, the authority legislation was largely modeled on the Resource Recovery Development Authorities Law, which was a tighter Development Authority statute than the General Development Authorities Law, and it took some powers from the Downtown Development Authorities Law, like grant powers, and added them in. And then I added the article on assessments. The cooperation article is modeled off of the cooperation law attached to the Housing Authorities Law that allows cities and counties to provide financial assistance to their local housing authorities. So this language is all language that pretty much comes from existing legislation woven together to fit this program in Georgia. And the existing Development Authorities Law wouldn't work. Atlanta tried to do it with the Downtown Development Authorities Law, but it wouldn't work very well, and the capital providers didn't want to use it because development authorities really weren't designed for CPACE, at least outside the central business districts.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So other questions, Representative Saines, you want to continue your, and I apologize for interrupting, but this is where, for me, I want to make sure my committee members, if they have questions, that we're doing that.
Whatever enables the committee to get their fact-finding mission in terms of understanding the policy and the intent. The only thing the majority of my presentations concluded, we do have a capital provider here that could touch on the benefits of the interest rates in terms of why we would be going through the hassle of this. But I would add, it is 100, because it was a big distinction for me to sponsor the bill. Though it is a government structured used, and that comes with its own liabilities, it's 100% private capital being infused, not tax dollars on any level. It is a government structure because, of course, there is a first right of refusal through using this. That's what enables the capital providers offering such a low rate because they're such a low risk. And I'd add to that, in years prior when it was introduced, there was some pushback by the Banking Association. the coalition that's behind this policy has done a great job in working with that sector, and they are neutral on the bill. And primarily, there is a provision for that for any property that has a mortgage or has a loan with first right, they would have to approve the use of this financing prior to that financing being allowable. So I think that's an important part to remember.
I know my vice chairman of the committee, and who I think if the bill sees the light of day, he may be able to inform us a little bit more on some of the things. But if I could ask the committee members to look over on page 22, line 533.
What was that line again?
533 on page 22. And you know, if you're going to create authority, you got to know what happens when an authority goes away. And I want you to read that section right there, and I'll ask Mr. Taylor to address it for us.
Yes. It actually comes, it's the identical language that was added to the Development Authorities Law. Previously, once the authority was created in Georgia, like a development authority, it just had perpetual existence. And some of the cities and counties didn't make their board appointments. They existed, they've been activated, but they weren't registered with DCA. And so the Development Authorities Law was amended to give them an avenue if they're don't want to use the authority or just become inactive, to dissolve it. And so as long as the authority has no undischarged obligations, either debt or contractual obligations, this gives the local cities and counties the option to dissolve the authority, so they don't have to fool with the annual registration with DCA, et cetera.
And just so everybody knows, this authority, it contemplates in here that you can have employees of your authority. Said and you know, all of those costs. So when you start looking at, you know, there's a lot of moving parts in this bill that I want to make sure that everybody is familiar with it and reads it. And I know the hour's getting late. Said what I'm going to ask your homework assignment. Said is take a look at this, talk to some of our folks here in the building that are much more familiar with it. You know, Representative Saines, I appreciate you bringing it. I see there's a potential upside to where it is and how it can benefit in some of these developments and people being able to get access to better funding for doing it. But there's a cost to it, and for me, I want to make sure that, you know, we're protecting the public in what we would contemplate doing here on this legislation, because as Mr. Taylor said, we've only done these big authority bills 3 times before. This will be number 4, and this is a huge step. So I don't take this job as chairman lightly, and I know you don't take it lightly as being a member of the committee. So thank you much. Any other final comments, Representative Saines?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this committee's time, and I more than understand taking the time to amply vet the legislation. I agree with you. It's a big step with what I would argue is a big benefit to our community's tools in moving our communities forward. But I appreciate the time and look forward to the added discussion.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.